If you're struggling with a mental health condition, you're not alone. In any given year, 1 in 5 people suffer from a mental health condition, and that rate is increasing worldwide. In this episode, I speak with Janae. Janae hit rock bottom in 2021 after she was admitted to hospital for attempted suicide. At the time, she was suffering from depression, anxiety, body dysmorphia, and an eating disorder. In hospital, she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. After being given a second chance at life and witnessing the heartbreaking impact her suicide attempt made on her loved ones, Janae took the sincere path of healing. In this inspirational podcast, Janae shares how she transformed her mental health, the therapies and interventions that supported her the most, the number one ingredient to healing mental health, what the inward journey really looks like beyond what you see on social media, and how to create long-term mental stability and happiness. I want to thank Janae for her courage and openness to share her recovery story, which has the potential to save lives. Welcome to the Self-Intelligence Podcast, where I have radically honest and heart-opening conversations with amazing people who are willing to share their stories and information that can have a profound impact on your life. Okay, thank you, Janae, for coming on to the Self-Intelligence Podcast to discuss what, unfortunately in many ways, but fortunately through the other side, many people experience what's known as rock bottom in life. And in rock bottom, well, it's gnarly, right? So essentially it's a crisis and there's a feeling like there's no way out. It's heavy and the ego goes a bit wild. Just so honored to tune in with you around this because you've come so far since that experience to share your journey and your wisdom and, be an inspiration to anybody else who may feel like they're in that whirlpool where they're stuck in that space and wanting some answers and a bit of direction and that type of thing. So let's start by, what happened for you? It was a couple of years ago. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I guess the context to everything is growing up, there was a range of different struggles that I went through. I mean, the earliest issues that I can remember just stemmed from body dysmorphia, self-confidence issues as like in primary school, and then leading up into high school that developed into eating disorders, and that carried on through the whole of my high school experience. And then that led into more of your serious mental health problems in grade 11, grade 12, finishing high school as well, where I was dealing with depression, anxiety, self-harm, and the eating disorders on top of that. And it all just collectively added up over the years. And I kind of just reached a point, I think it was in grade 12, where things started really snowballing for me, and I started getting different types of support and then relapsing or going through different issues again. But it wasn't until after I finished high school that these issues really peaked. I mean, I was out in the world by myself. I wasn't in the box of school anymore. I had moved out of home from my parents' place. I was working full-time trying to figure out what I wanted to do for study, where I wanted to go with the rest of my life, and the craziness of being an 18-year-old out in this big wide world just completely exacerbated so many problems for me. And I guess the rock bottom that we'll go into is that all of these issues really just compiled to a point where I felt like I didn't have a way out anymore. And I ended up in 2021 in hospital after intentional overdose. And that was it. That was the rock bottom for me. It was years of different issues and just feeling completely hopeless about it all. And the only thing that felt right for me at the time was to not be here, to not be dealing with the issues anymore. And so that put me in hospital for a couple of days, and that was the pivotal point. that was where everything everything that we'll go into now stems from that moment of like, wow, all of my issues reached this point, and thankfully I was okay, and I am here today to talk about it.
Yeah.
But it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, so a lot of people experience suicidal thoughts, you know, particularly when your chips are down, where it doesn't seem like any values are going to be met, where things feel hopeless, and essentially there's nothing in the mind that can work out a way through. And so a last ditch attempt for control of your life is to end it. It's like, that's the only control I have. So it is the only thing that makes sense at that point with the awareness that you have and the tools that you have and the influences that you have. Yeah, it's very sad that, of course, a lot of people do end up, you know, ending their lives and not discovering, thankfully, what you have. But a lot of people would also relate just to having suicidal thoughts, maybe not even attempting that in the way that you did, who feel like they're grappling with that a lot. And it's like, how do I get rid of this horrible thinking as soon as I get triggered in life, as soon as things don't go the way that I want, as soon as I feel those really deep, uncomfortable feelings when things happen? And it doesn't have to take much either when you're at that point, is it? It's like you're just ready to tip. How do I cope with this? And of course, then the medicating oneself to not feel those uncomfortable feelings is often the case. Distractions and, you know, endless therapy and all sorts of stuff. So what was it about that experience? Because you took a different path there. Death is a very wise teacher.
Wow. Yeah. Well, look, leading up to that point, I had tried so many different things. You know, I had been to different specialists. I had been to an eating disorder specialist. I'd had different psychologists. I had psychiatrists. There was talk of different medications. There was like, I put in the work even leading up to this to try and help myself. And nothing seemed to be working. There was just this constant like returning back to this place of, I don't want to be here. This is just too much effort now. I don't want to be here. Nothing's working. Nothing's helping. No one understands me. No one cares. There was just this spiraling of like, I'm trying to put in the effort, but also why? Like what? Like why am I even trying?
That thought, what's the point? Right?
What's the point?
What's
exactly.
the point is it's a big guy in these moments, isn't it? Like
it fully was. And it's exhausting to try and help yourself sometimes. It feels more comfortable to just immerse yourself in the depression.
Yeah.
Because stepping outside of that is just, it's hard. It's difficult.
Yeah.
And so I guess what happened for me is I got to this rock bottom point of the what's the point just took over my brain, and I didn't see the point anymore. And yeah, I intentionally overdosed with the intention of not being here. And I didn't take enough, so I was okay. But I spent that night in hospital with my closest girlfriend at the time. And she looked at me at a point and was like, I need to call your parents. I'm going to call your parents. They're going to come here. And that set me off because I didn't want my parents knowing even half of the experience I was going through. But there was an intuitive understanding of like, they need to be here for this, so we'll take that step. And I think at this point it was probably 4:00 in the morning. So a couple hours later, they'd woken up and they'd come and seen me in the hospital. And just to see their reaction, you know, it's almost like I had an out-of-body experience of watching myself in this hospital room overdosing and watching my parents walk in and see me for the first time in this situation. And that just broke my heart, you know, like in that moment, none of these other issues mattered. You know, the eating disorder didn't matter. The depression didn't matter. None of those issues mattered. The fact that my parents were there and they had to see me in that situation, I felt horrific. I was like, how could I put myself through this and how could I put my parents through this and my girlfriend who was with me at the time. It was just this like slap in the face moment of like, what the fuck am I doing? It was that heartbreak was the initial thing that snapped me into what am I doing? How did I get here?
Yeah, I love this because, you know, you did all the psychotherapy and you did all those other things and tried to get help and all of that. But the genuine, sincere question, how did I let this happen? Right? How did I let this happen? There's something very profound in that, because I remember for myself when I was in my dark spaces and came, you know, to the same place as you have now, it took taking the responsibility I was resisting taking. And when you say something like, how did I let this happen? It came from your heart though. It didn't come from a fault place or a blame place. It came from a like, I have the power to not let this happen. I'm beyond this. You know, there's something intrinsic in that. Even though you may not be aware of it at the time or conscious at the time, that's what you just said, is I'm beyond this. How did I let this happen?
Yeah.
That's what starts the
Completely.
inner journey.
I love that.
So then you started the inner journey from there, because you're now like, I now get what it means to be responsible. And all of a sudden, the world shifts because you've shifted to now be a true support to what you're going through, not this thing that's going on out there that's trying to kind of come into me. It's like, no, it's coming from me now. And now all of that supporting me, not it's going to do something to me and take off the responsibility from me, but it's going to support me in being responsible. And we'll get more clear about what that responsibility means probably as we go along, because I wanted you to share about where did things go from there? Like, what did you start looking into with that new energy now, that new vibration that you're walking with?
Well, I guess, yeah, that was the turning point for me of like, I don't want to end up there again. I don't want to see my family go through that. I don't want to see my friends go through that. And also I don't want to be going through that. Like you know, like not at that point, it wasn't even just emotional and mental issues. My body was destroyed. Like I'd hurt my body and even scars on my body. And I like emotionally, mentally, physically, I was ruining myself. And then I saw that I was ruining other people. And I was like, that's got to change. So in the hospital experience, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. This was the first time I'd heard about BPD, they call it. And it made no sense to me at the time. So I really tried to understand it. I did a lot of research into what is BPD, and it just didn't click for me until I really went into it and started researching proper medical documents around it. And this is an interesting thing because at first I super, super resonated with this diagnosis. I was like, oh, that's me. I fit in that box. I tick that box. I tick that box. And the therapy that they highly recommend for BPD is dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. So I was released from hospital with all of the information on BPD and dialectical behavioral therapy. So that was the first thing was there's a new diagnosis to research, to get familiar with, and there's DBT therapy that's lined up. That was interesting for me because for the first time in my life, I felt like I fit into a box of like, you know, beforehand it was, yes, I have an eating disorder, but there's other issues as well. Yes, I have these depressive symptoms. There's also other issues as well. So like nothing really feels like me. Nothing really feels like what I'm going through. Nothing's relatable here. And then now it was this comfort in like, oh, I just have BPD. It's fine. Everything, like, it's okay. I fit under this umbrella term of BPD.
Stop there for a sec. How relieving is a diagnosis? It's
it
all
was
of a sudden
insane.
oh, the weight has been lifted. I get what's going on for
I
me,
know.
right?
I know.
It's almost like this instant gratification or instant relief comes with a diagnosis. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. So, yes,
Yeah.
continue. I just wanted to talk about that because there is within everybody, particularly when they're going through the process of taking truer responsibility,
Mm,
right? Is, yeah, but maybe I can still hand it over to something else, you see,
yeah.
right? Like a
Yeah.
diagnosis. And there's no issue with diagnosis. There's no issue there. Those things are relatively true. Perhaps you were presenting at that time with the symptoms or the characteristics of this
Mm,
disorder you're talking about, multiple or borderline personality.
borderline.
We'll go into it as we go along, is how relative all that is and how
Yeah.
the ego can grab onto identity, grab onto the shape that takes and go, oh, yes, this feels like I can hide here. But
Mm,
anyway, so this happened for you and continuing on.
yes. So that was the first thing for me that ever made me feel seen and made me feel heard
Mm,
was
mm,
this. I fit into this box. Thank God. There's something that makes me feel like I make sense. And so I then went into doing the DBT therapy, which was really helpful. And I super gained like a lot of different information from that. And mixed in at the time with me researching BPD and trying to understand this new version of myself. That was the first step in my recovery was the BPD and DBT. And then as I kept going with DBT, for me, it felt like I was gaining a lot of skills. I was gaining a lot of like, if I'm having trouble regulating my emotions, what can I do? So they gave me like a lot of different acronyms for different tools and different activities and things that I can do to help myself in these high intensity situations, which again was super beneficial. Even just like that year going through that therapy, I learnt different ways of regulating and not experiencing all of these heightened emotions and symptoms of BPD. It reached a point for me with DBT and other types of psychotherapies that I was also doing at the time. Here's a good way of putting it. I had a toolbox, and for that whole year, I was adding tools to the toolbox. It was like, okay, when I'm in this situation, I've got this tool. When I'm in this situation, I've got this tool. At some point, it felt like my toolbox within that area was full. I was like, okay, I know what to do now in these certain situations. That's great. Fantastic. But there was this desire to know more. There was this desire to go deeper than the toolbox. Like, why do I even need a toolbox? Like, what's even broken, or what am I perceiving is broken in my life that I need a toolbox? And for me, I guess what's great in this situation is my mum is a naturopath. So I've been brought up in and around natural health therapies and holistic health therapies. I've always had a lot of women in my life specifically that are in the natural and holistic health world. And at this point, I was like, okay, I have delved into the psychotherapies. I have had that experience, and now I'm ready to maybe start learning more from all of these fantastic women in my life that have a different perspective on health and emotional health and physical health. So at this point, not only did I dive into that, but I also started healing my relationship with my mum, because I started viewing her as this resource of information and connections to natural therapies. And that was when this next part of my journey started, really. It was at the end of doing my DBT, my CBT therapies, and realizing that there was just this desire to go deeper and to understand myself on a deeper level, and not necessarily like need the toolkit, because I'm working deeper than the toolkit, if that makes sense.
I think there's something really key here as well. Like, in how we integrate all of these offerings that society presents us in challenging times, to understand that there are different times for different things, you know?
Yeah.
Like, for
Yeah.
example, if you have overdosed, you don't come to me. You go to the hospital. The hospital has the right environment to
Yeah.
support you in that moment. And I find the Western system of medical intervention, this is my observation, anyone can agree or disagree, of course, with everything, is that they do really well in crisis situations. You know, when you've broken your leg or there's certain illnesses that require more like a very acute intervention. Whereas when it starts to get to things like where you're starting to head now, it's getting more subtle in its approach. So they've got you from a gross vibrational state, right, where you're in danger to yourself, right? And then you're sort of coming into a more subtle state, but there's a sense within yourself, which is who you are, of course, is like, this goes more subtle than this. I can feel that. I can sense that there's more subtlety in the approach. And of course, when that happens, you outgrow naturally what got you there, you see? And then it tends to go a bit more, the words will start coming out like natural therapies and holistic therapy. These words will start to happen as you become more subtle as it goes along. So, because for anyone listening who's in the journey, oftentimes one will be pointed out to be right and one will be pointed out to be wrong, you know, and it goes like this as opposed to going, no, it's all got its place, you know, and we all have a different time with these different things. Now at this place where you're going more subtly and deeply, subtlety and depth are synonymous, right?
Yes. Yeah, I love that you bring that up, because that's been a journey of mine, is to also not swing on the pendulum of being totally for modern medicine versus totally for these natural and holistic medicines, because for a while there, I needed the hospital support. I needed the psychiatric support. I was in a crisis situation and many different crisis situations. And now I work in the natural health field. I absolutely love what I'm doing, but I still recognize the support that modern medicine offers me, and finding that middle ground of, you know, I use antidepressants as a part of my mental health routine to keep me up. There was a really large portion of my life where I wanted absolutely nothing to do with that, because I was just like, I want to do this fully by myself. And I think at a certain point in my life, I will want to take myself off of those. But there was just this recognition at a certain point in time where I was like, at the moment, I need that level of support to get myself through studying, through working, through all of this. And now that balancing act is super important to me. And I think that that's something that I, as a part of my message to people coming from this natural space, I never want to diss contemporary modern medicine ever, because it's there for a reason and it's powerful and it's helped me so much. But we'll get back to what we were on track with. So so I actually started studying naturopathy to really immerse myself in that for a period of time. And at this point, I had actually already met Tess, your partner, who also teaches self-intelligence. So I really got into that work deeper. I'd met her before the hospital situation and then went missing for a period of time, came back to it. And this next time coming back to it was when the work finally set in for me. I was open-minded to different things at this point in time.
Well, like we said, you are now actually prepared to take responsibility. And you don't work with someone like Tess and someone like myself or anyone in the field like this until you've reached that point. There's a certain willingness necessary In the same way, there's a certain willingness necessary if you go to the gym and you have your physical trainer there, that you're the one who's running on the treadmill or lifting the weights. Like, you've got to be willing to do that. They're not going to do that for you, but they're there to assist you because they've got expertise in, that level of support. So you're now showing up more. There's more of you showing up now.
There was a presence. There was a sincere presence.
Yeah.
And that was when this work really started impacting my life properly. I was open to receiving different supports. I was open to actually looking after my body and my mind for the first time in my life. And it was totally uncomfortable. There was nothing comfortable about going through this process whatsoever. They were like, I almost, this is funny because I was having a conversation with someone recently where I was like, especially on social media, I feel like there's this image or idea of what like a health journey looks like or what it should feel like, especially when you're working with emotional health. It's like, do all of these things and you'll feel amazing. Do all of these things and you're going to have the best experience. You're going to be the best version of yourself. And I almost want to destroy that image, because it's like, when you're working on yourself, you're going to be experiencing every single range of emotion. You're going to be experiencing all of the pain. You're going to be backtracking through your whole childhood experiences. You're doing the inner child work. You're doing the shadow work. There's nothing comfortable about that. There's nothing rainbows and fairies and lights about that. But the level of truth and the level of love that it will bring you is so worth it.
If you would like to discover who you really are beyond the voice in your head and emotional states that cause relationship drama, stress, health issues, procrastination, sabotage, addictions, essentially all the drama and personal problems you can think of, come and join me for the Wake Up Experience, which is the first step in freeing yourself from the inside out. See the link in the description for more details.
You start seeing the discomfort as like a catalyst for growth. You start seeing all of the negative emotions as fuel to keep going, which is like mind-blowing for me to even hear those words come out of my mouth, considering where I was a couple of years ago. But it's just life-changing.
Well, in the same way, like mentioning the gym again, because that's such a relatable and simple way to see it, is if you're going in there, unhealthy and perhaps, largely overweight and all that kind of thing, it's challenging. You're going to have knee pain and you're going to have all these things come up, be activated, right? And the old self said, I can't deal with it. I can't. It's basically an I can't and I can't handle, right? I can't handle. Whereas the new version of yourself that's taking responsibility is, no, it's my responsibility to handle this. So if these emotions come, I'll be able to handle this because, one, I've made that choice within myself, and two, I've got new tools as well, new emerging tools that can support me to become strong, like strengthen. You mentioned inner work, right? Inner work is implying inner strength or developing inner strength, right?
Yeah.
And so you to continue with a little bit of your journey of, you went to naturopath, that was a part of like looking after yourself and your health and your body and this type of thing. When did what did you bring in that started the process of the inner work? You said you had tests supporting you and then you did some of your own studies. Like what were those?
Yes. So it was through studying naturopathy that it clicked for me that the emotional side to health was what really drew me in. Naturopathy, and I was doing that for around a year. It was very focused on the physical ailments, how to support your body physically. And I also love all of that but there was this real deep desire for me to go more into emotional and mental health rather than the physical side of health. So after a year, I finished a year of my naturopathy studies, and I was like, okay, where do I want to go with this? Because I know now that this holistic field is where I want to be in. It feels really right to me. And also through having Tess by my side, I was like, this feels like the pathway that is opening up for me very naturally. And I was tossing up between psychology and counseling. And the university that I was at for naturopathy offered a really beautiful counseling course. So I just transferred straight into that. So I started that at the start of this year. And this year has been by far just the most in tune year that I feel like I've had, because it's just, I've had the opportunity to go really deep into my counseling studies, using that as the basis for myself, but also the work that I want to start bringing into the world once I finish. Then I also got really drawn into energy healing towards the end of last year. I had met some really beautiful connections while I was living up on the Sunshine Coast. There was a Zentai shiatsu massage therapist that I met. There was pranic energy healers that I met. A lot of really intuitive healers just kept showing up in my life while I was living up on the Sunshine Coast. And I just got sessions done from them. I had different friends offer for me to experience different things, and I just dipped my toes in all of these different areas of health and wellness. And the thing that really stood out for me was energy healing. And again, my mum, she's a fantastic naturopath. She's also an energy healer. So I was already open to the ideas of energy healing and everything. And I just bit the bullet and did my level 1 Reiki course at the end of last year. Absolutely loved it. The amount of inner peace that it offered me really complemented the desire to go into the emotional understanding. And all of these different things I was doing just complemented each other so beautifully. Like the work that I would do with Tess and with you, and specifically the self-intelligence course that I did with you at the end of last year, that overlapped with my level 1 Reiki course.
Yes.
So I was already really immersed in the self-intelligence work and practicing these notice yourself meditations in the start and end of my days, and then going into Reiki, which is such a beautiful practice. And as a practitioner, you're basically in this meditative state while you're performing or on a client. So
if you would like to download a free beginner self-recognition guided meditation audio to start your journey of healing and freeing yourself from the inside out, see the link in the description or go to selfintelligence.com.
All of these different things that were coming up for me was just sending me deeper down this track of go inward, and through going inward, you'll actually open up and start supporting other people.
Yes, it's a natural process, isn't it? For a lot of people, not everybody, but there are a lot of people, particularly if they gravitate to this podcast, right, that know they're here to help others, to guide others, to support others. But first, they know they got a whole bunch of stuff in their own backyard to sort out, and it's like, once you start gravitating to more the subtle therapies, there's generally a bit more of working on yourself involved in the learning process of that. Whereas the grosser therapies, and I don't mean like gross, I mean like grosser in vibration, there's less of an emphasis, it seems, that you've done any work on yourself. It's more what you can learn to apply strictly onto other people. So, for example, I've trained many psychologists in this work, and they would tell me we didn't do one day of work on ourselves, on our egos, on our shadows, on our
Mm.
conditioning, on all of this stuff, we learn a whole bunch of amazing things, as you mentioned, like it's got its place and its place. But I kind of could keep my stuff and still apply the tool, right? Where
Yeah.
as it becomes more subtle, it's almost like you have to be the vibration of the tool you're offering, in the sense that that's what someone's coming to you for. And not that you have to be a perfect person or anything like this. The ego will create that version,
Mm.
but it's more about that sincerity, and it's more about that I'm here, curious and willing to take responsibility and willing to look at myself and willing to be self-aware and see what's really going on. That willingness is the vibration. That's it. That willingness is there. And that
Mm.
will change behavior and change all sorts of external outcomes from that point, that other people get drawn to, and they vibrate with you. And it is
Mm.
vibrational. Like, so that people come because, I don't know, you got a vibe that I want to
Oh,
tune in with,
totally. And I think something that really stood out with me, for me with Tess, was before seeing her, like probably the year before, I saw two different psychologists. And I remember the first one didn't super vibe with them, wasn't it. So I went to the second one. And in the very first session with this second psychologist, I remember she used the exact same word for word metaphor as my previous psychologist that was at a totally different clinic. And they used word for word, written out of a textbook, the same thing.
Yeah.
And at that moment, the rest of the session, I basically just wasn't there. I was like, I feel like you're just reading a book back to me. And I just wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
And I think having that experience, walking into the room with Tess for the first time, and you can feel the sincerity. You can feel that she's done her own work.
Yeah.
And, we would sit and we would cry together, and she would share from such a deep and beautiful place. And that for me was what really I think Tess was actually one of the first people and moments where I found my calling into this world, because it was that level of sincerity and connection and truth and love and care for a complete stranger that she met at a cafe a couple of weeks ago, coming into a session where I was like, this is what we need more of. This is what people who are dealing with suicidal ideation and ending up in hospital and being treated like different clients that are just coming in and out. Like, I want those people to be able to experience the level of sincerity and love that I've experienced through all of these different works. Really.
Yes. Well, that's what it comes down to, doesn't it? I mean, when you're talking about your core issue at that time, which was, I don't know how I fit into this life. I'm more sensitive. I don't respond in the same ways. I can't cope with this, the way this is, going. The love, the vibration of love is what's necessary to discover that you belong here beyond what you can even imagine, right? But the ego state is in the place of comparison and trying to fit the mold and all of that. And it doesn't work like that. And so when you can involve yourself, like you mentioned Zentai, I know Gwyn well, he just emanates love.
Yeah, fully.
So the whole modality that he teaches has that imbued in it, you see. And so you kept moving to the vibration of love. And then Tess is just, I mean, we've mentioned her a few times. If this is not clear yet, for those listening, Tess, right at this point, she offers like one-on-one sessions, and she essentially just does self-intelligence work. And what that involves is inquiry and self-inquiry, self-recognition practices and trigger inquiry, and everything that is what's causing you to be in resistance to reality. and therefore feeling like you don't belong here and feeling like there's something wrong, and it puts you in a problem consciousness place. And she shows you in the most genuine way how to discover that you are beyond all of this. And that's the whole essence of self-intelligence. And she probably advised you to come and do the course.
Yes.
Yes, to immerse in it in a whole nother way, because the course offers you all of that again, different things, but also a pathway if you want to do this work, like if you want to share it with others, right? So now when you're doing a Reiki session, for example, and you can see that there's a blockage there, or you're supporting people with a certain block or whatever the case is, if they continue to show up to you with that blockage, you can invite them to go, look, do you want to see how your will is holding this blockage? Because this blockage will likely relate to some level of fear and some kind of conditioning going on in your world that your identity, ego, is holding on to for dear life. And we can bring things into balance, but if you're holding it, it's not going to move. Like, it's not going to move for a long period of time or transform or unblock. Do you know what I mean? Fully.
Yeah. And
a lot of people who have come to me over the years, many hundreds of practitioners actually, have come because they've like realized that the work that they do is amazing, and they support people with their symptoms and relief work and various other things, and then started to see, but there's a lot of people who are holding on to something. There's something deeper going on, like meaning more subtle again. How do we work on this stuff? Like, how are we going to get down to that stuff, right? And the instant thought is like what you thought, which is go and be a counselor or go and be a psychologist, like maybe that's where we have to go. And sometimes people have gone and discovered things like self-intelligence. It's like, oh, that's an avenue to go deeper. That's not a 6-year degree or, whatever the case is. So yeah, how have you found the effectiveness of what you've learnt in terms of self-intelligence and how it fits in the piece for you? Like, as far as like dealing with your day-to-day challenges, all of that sort of stuff.
In the easiest way possible, self-intelligence has formed the absolute basis of my everyday life, not even just from a work perspective, but, it's as simple as waking up in the morning and noticing that you check for the weather and you're like, okay, well, what's the weather like today? It's rainy. Shit, my day is going to be awful because it's rainy. And then what are you doing? You're stabbing yourself in the foot for the rest of the day. And then it's the same thing with, waking up in the morning, weather's bad. Now suddenly you're stuck in traffic and you might be 5 minutes late to work. It's like all of those things prior to self-intelligence meant for me that the rest of my day was thrown in the bin. I may as well just go back to sleep and not do the rest of my day, because I've been taken over by these thoughts of how the rest of my day is going to be. And then for the rest of the day, you prove that to yourself. It's a shit day because it was raining, and now my clients are all late to work, and now this and my car and the blah. And then you just spiral for the rest of the day, all because you woke up in the morning and you believed that the rain was going to make your day awful.
Yes. Yes.
And then like that's a really basic level of the work. But then also the way that I relate to people has completely changed. I was in a really beautiful 2-year-long relationship, and my partner, he was really receptive to the work. We actually went and saw tests together once, and the way that we would go about conflict was totally different to anything I've ever experienced. There was just a certain level of understanding and love for the other person that put so much space in between any sort of triggering or conflicting event. And, towards the end of our relationship, we talked about open relating and how maybe we could start implementing some of these trigger theories into our relationship through open relating. And that was, this understanding that people connect in different ways. Why am I getting triggered when my partner is getting flirted on by a different person? Why is that now suddenly his fault and I'm angry because of this whole situation? So it just offered a totally different way of looking at my relationships with people, whether that was intimate, whether it was the barista serving me coffee in the morning, whether it was my parents. Like, there's just an understanding of other people that comes through so beautifully in this work. You just don't even have to try sometimes. You just there's just there's love. That I'm just going to keep coming back to that.
Well, yeah, I call this work the art of letting go. Sometimes I refer to it that way. And you actually learn how to do that, because when you are in your, difficult situation and your rock bottom moments, or when you're self-harming before, or all the things you were doing, it may have occurred to someone, a friend or whatever the case is, like, mate, just let it go. Just let it go. Like, why are you carrying on with this? Just let it go. And it's like, but wait a sec. I haven't been taught how to let this thought go. I haven't been taught how to observe this emotion, which feels like an avalanche going on inside of me. I haven't been shown how to observe this deeply uncomfortable sensation. I haven't been shown how to discover that I am beyond all that is happening, and the capacity to have and employ very skillfully, even surgically, the right questions, because we don't ask intelligent questions when shit goes wrong.
Yeah.
We ask questions that keeps it going, right? Why is it raining today? Well, that doesn't change a thing. That just brings on the energetic of the victim. And the victim goes, great, I'm now going to be the perpetrator. When are you going to be the perpetrator? When you go to the barista and you treat them like shit to get your coffee. And then now I'm a victim again because they didn't get it right and there wasn't enough sugar. And then it is just this cascade of negativity just cycling out into the world. I mean, how much negativity is going around without the understanding of how to be the one to take responsibility, not to let it go that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Relationships, my gosh, they bring up the intensity of this, because you cannot escape yourself in a way, because someone keeps coming close to you when all your shit comes up, and either you blame them all day long for all your problems, or you learn how to work on yourself to come clear. And that's essentially what we're talking about. So when that which you are holding on to is removed, then you are in your vibration of love. And not I love this, but I am the love vibration itself. Yes?
Yeah.
So when you said, I don't even know, I don't even have to try, I just love, it's because there's nothing in the way. There's nothing stopping the love. It's just clear. But if a thought comes in that's believed, and a conditioning comes in that's believed, a perception, all of these things, then now it's obscuring the naturalness of that vibration.
Yeah.
And now everything's difficult. Everything's hard. Everything's a problem. Yes. Everything's in the way. But when the love is just there, everything seems to flow. It's like the wind's in your sails. There's synchronistic events. I want to go back to flow. Like, how much do things flow when you're in the space and the vibration of yourself, which is love? It's just like, is this world serving me? Like, is that what's happening? Whereas when it's a problem consciousness, it's like the whole world is attacking me. It's like no matter what happens, it's hard and it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare.
It is. And I mean, even that just reminds me, from the headspace that I'm in now, I can look back at when my eating disorder was at its peak, and I can see how, for me, food was an enemy. It was a total enemy. Food controlled my life for such a long period of time. I couldn't have a plate of food in front of me without crying or without already thinking about and having these stories and images playing out in my head of what eating this plate of food would look like. And through doing this self-intelligence work specifically, I've come to this absolute simplicity of how on earth did a plate of food become my enemy? It's like, it is food. It's just food. It just is what it is.
But let's take that. Whoa. Just so that doesn't trigger the shit out of someone who's listening, right?
No, that's very true.
Because yes, that's the end result. That's the end result. You literally will get to that point where you cannot invest in the idea that that could be a problem. Yes, end result. But when you're not skilled and you don't have the experience that you've had, because remember, you've engaged in numerous self-recognition practices and trigger inquiry practices, and you've actually become somewhere in, you've mastered certain things within yourself, so that thought or any perception like that could not hold residency in you. You've developed that now, right?
Yes.
But for someone else who hasn't developed any of that, it doesn't matter how much you tell yourself, I shouldn't be worrying about this, this food plate or whatever in front of me. I shouldn't be triggered about my partner because they did that, or I shouldn't be screaming at cars on my way to work because there's traffic, or I shouldn't be. You can say that shit all day, but you will still be triggered. You'll be triggered every time, and you'll be basically a slave to the idea that you shouldn't be triggered by it, but you are.
Yes.
But you took it way further than that. You got personal intervention support, right? With Tess, as you mentioned. You've done the course with me, which involves a challenge and doing all the practices, and it's another thing again. And now you've arrived, right? In a similar way to if someone, like we talked about the gym, was now like, oh, now I run up a bunch of stairs. Like, why was I so exhausted last time? It's like, because last time you were grossly overweight and unhealthy, and now you're not because you've gone through this whole process, and now, a flight of stairs is like whatever. But what about when we climb Mount Everest, you see? And then it's like, oh, now I've got some work to do again, because that's a different level of challenge, right? And when it comes to the inner work, when life and reality starts to burrow down deeper into places of your identity, it gets challenging, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's like
definitely.
Okay, I've overcome the small hanging fruit, as Michael Singer puts it, which is I've dealt with the weather, and I've dealt with this and that, but I've also dealt with some high hanging fruit too, which if you've had an eating disorder, if anyone knows anything about that, it's major. Like, it is majorly debilitating in people's lives. And I had another lady in the group who overcome an eating disorder she had since she was 11 to her late age. And through this work, she also overcame that. And it's interesting. It's important for the listener to know this. There's no intention for me to have fixed it or, resolved any specific issue. All I deal with is the absolute core of the issue, which is you, which is who you believe you think you are, and that the fact that you think you're the voice in your head and you believe you're the voice in the head. So if the voice in the head believes that there's a problem with that plate, how can you not have a problem? You have to have a problem. So we deal with the core so deeply, the core, that one person has come through a financial challenge that they've had. Another person like you has come through, I don't have this eating disorder or body dysmorphia. How's the body dysmorphia going? Because those two things are a massive challenge for so many people.
Yeah.
They look at their body in the mirror and they're just like, oh my God, all this, let's just back it back one little bit. Okay. What causes the problem is that whatever you're seeing in your reality is assumed that it's not going to give you what you want. I'm not going to get what I want, which means I won't be happy. With body dysmorphia, the idea is when I see my body, there's nothing about it that's going to give me what I want. All the imperfections I see just spell rejection, and, humiliation and all of this stuff, which is not what I want. So this very body is going to make me unhappy. So now I'm a victim to my own body. And if you become a victim, you become a perpetrator. How do you become a perpetrator? You stop eating. You abuse the body that you believe is not going to give you what you want. But as you come into the vibration of love, you start dropping that victim and you start dropping the perpetrator and you start dropping the thoughts that say this plate of food is a problem. And actually you go, this plate of food is going to be so nourishing to my beautiful body. And it's totally changed.
Yeah.
So,
I think the most powerful question that has stuck with me throughout this self-intelligence work is, who would you be without that thought?
yes.
That sentence is written in so many different places in my life, because for me, the big thing, coming back to the eating disorder, there were so many images that were caused around, like in my brain, so many images and stories I was telling myself whenever there was food in front of me. There were images of me being old and lonely and fat and unloved and unsuccessful. And there's a whole narrative that's actually getting played out in your head every time you look at a piece of food. You're like, completely, you're not here with the food anymore. You're off in this whole future projection and narrative that you're telling yourself.
Yes.
And that question of who would you be without that thought? Oh,
And
who would I be without that thought?
I want to credit that question to Byron Katie. Those listening may or may not be aware of Byron Katie. She created The Work, which is a series of questions, and it's got a similar vibe. Our questions are different but have a combination and all of that. But this woman was completely debilitated by her mind to the point where she couldn't leave her home. Like she couldn't leave a room, in the deepest, darkest place, you know, kind of rounding this back to rock bottom in a way. And I want to totally mention, rock bottom is not necessary to do the inner work. Just the same way as becoming morbidly obese is not necessary to go to the gym and do exercise. It's not necessary. So some people have to go to that. Some people go there for some reason, but that's not necessary. So I don't want anyone thinking, maybe I'm just not willing to do it because I got to get to rock bottom. No, you don't.
I'm not bad enough.
That's going to be on this planet. As if the vision I have comes to fruition, that is not going to be necessary at all. We don't have to suffer like this, you know, because we have been unaware and in a dream. The suffering has been necessary for a lot of people to wake up, and you had your wake up moment. Byron Katie had her wake up moment, where she discovered somehow I'm aware of this voice. This voice is not me, you see. And she had this moment of peace. So her life hasn't changed. Her situation out there hasn't changed. Nothing out there is different. The plate of food's no different. Same plate of food, right? But I've changed. I've changed because I'm not viewing this through this filter of a problem. And then what happened is anytime a problem thought would come, she would question it. And you guys get in self-intelligence, you get masterful at a whole range of questions and employ those questions at the right time with the right thought. You get good at that. And so everyone's different with this. Like, say, for example, in relationship challenges, sometimes the thought, whose business is this? The question, whose business is this? Is like the linchpin question
the
to
money.
like, you know, it's the money question for relationships. Whereas for you with food and that, it was this or your body dysmorphia. So just to give that a bit of context and also to credit Byron Katie there, because this work is standing on the shoulders of giants, you know, it's standing on the shoulders of men and women out there who have chosen their heart over their mind, you see. And you're benefiting from that right now. My life has benefited from that right now. Those who are listening right now are benefiting from that. We have so much to be grateful for with how consciousness and grace has provided us the resources to live just so profoundly and abundantly in this world, you know? What else would you like to say to wrap up any of this for those maybe who are listening, who are sort of maybe on the verge of like knowing I feel scared that if I go into myself, like I'm not going to be able to cope. I'm not going to be able to handle. I'm maybe afraid of the loss that may take place in my life, in my circumstances, if I do that, because there is such fear like around this, you see. As such an inspirational young woman, yeah, what would you say to anyone who may be in that space?
I'd say what I would want myself to hear a couple years ago, which is that save the tears for the very end. It sounds so cliche, but you just have to oh my gosh, I'm so stuck with this.
Say the cliche.
Give yourself so much love, and all of the love that you can afford to at that point in time, even if it is the smallest amount, even if the only thing that you can manage to do is get yourself out of bed and brush your teeth that day. Give yourself a damn big pat on the back. And then every day, just do one thing more if you can. So just wake up, brush your teeth, hop in the shower. The next day, wake up, brush your teeth, hop in the shower, have a meal. And you just keep doing that. You just add tiny little bite sizes to the puzzle, because yes, I'm sitting here and having a massive conversation with you about all of this work that I've done, but this has been, 10 years of my life of experiencing all of these different things and adding all of the tools, meeting so many different people. It does not happen overnight. There are days where I couldn't get myself out of bed, and now after 10 years and a lot of effort and a lot of tears, I'm standing in a client room helping other people with this. But it does not happen overnight. You just have to bite-sized chunks, and every time you do a tiny little thing, give yourself credit for it, because it can be really hard when you are in such a low place. I know how hard it can be to even just roll out of bed. But if you manage to do that, fucking give yourself a pat on the back, because you deserve it. You deserve every little piece of love every second of every day, and just keep going. Just keep adding a little thing every day.
I love that you mentioned that. I've had a lot of people come to me because they want to live more purposefully and more connected in service. And there's a lot of fear there, not being enough and fear of failure and all these fears, which is with everything. And I say, what the difference is between someone who discovers their service in this world and those who don't, or feel like they're sort of just living to, pay the bills and whatever, is they acknowledge themselves. They acknowledge every step of the way. Every small thing is acknowledged. Whereas in your conditioned mind, it's never enough.
No.
Because as soon as you have that shower, the thought is, which you've become surgical about, well, of course I should be able to have a shower. How is this any good? Why is this helpful? Why is this like something worth celebrating, you see? So the should thought will just throw the acknowledgement in the bin instantly. And so
completely,
when you learn the nature of the quality of these thoughts that are robbing you and molesting you from the inside out, and you are surgical about them. Why do I say surgical? Because you remove them. How do you remove them? You learn how to stop investing in them. You invested in the thought, a shower's not enough. So although this beautiful woman said this, I cannot receive it because I invested in that thought and I believed it. And so I cannot go to the next step of making a meal or doing this and that. And this is why the cliches are cliches, because they can often remain ungrounded and unembodied for people who are not skilled in actually how that works, you see.
Yeah.
But the cliches aren't like that for those who came up with them, who were sincere and they embodied and lived what they were saying, just like what you're saying, you see. So if you want to embody the cliches, right, then follow your heart, follow your curiosity, like Janae just did with her whole process. Yeah. Guided to all sorts of different things, more and more subtle work. And you are such an inspiration. I cannot wait to see where and how you become of support and service to others. It is clear to me that you have in your heart and in your gifts the capacity to make such a difference in other people's lives and share that from those who've made such a difference in your life. Yeah.
Thank you. And I just want to, I want to really thank you a lot for this. This is quite the full circle moment for me to actually sit and be able to reflect on the past couple of years, and even thinking about where I was when I first met Tess, and now being able to sit and have this chat with you. Like, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for all of the experiences that I've gone through, big and small and high emotions, low emotions. I'm grateful for it because I get to sit here and do this podcast with you now and talk about it. So thank you. Thank you so much for everything.
Yes, and I'll put Tessa's detail. I'll put Tessa's details in the link in this this podcast. If anyone is like, "Who's this Tess chick?" I want to talk to. Who is this
Tess that Janae's in love
with? Yes, I'll do that.
I love it.
Oh, thank you so much. You're a legend.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you got value out of this, please share it so that other people can benefit also. If you are fed up with the drama, overwhelm, or suffering going on in your life, and you would like expert guidance and support tailored to your situation, come and be a guest on the Self-Intelligence podcast. Don't go another day confused how to address the challenges you are facing. If you want to be a guest, go to the link in the description below. And for more information about self-intelligence, including joining my next Wake Up experience or detailed information about my self-intelligence course, go to selfintelligence.com.